Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I have a lot of tips for you for riding electric scooters. These will be general tips that are applicable to most scooters you might have. Let's get started. Every time before you go out and ride, it's important to quickly check a few things related to your equipment. This doesn't have to be a very extensive and time-consuming process, but it's good to have a minimum set of things that can be confirmed very quickly. I have a private pilot's license, and every time before flying we do something called a pre-flight check. This can be applied to scooters as well, and there are a few things I'd recommend you check before going. This can be done very quickly, and I'd be surprised if it takes more than a minute. First, physically touch and press on the stem locking latch to make sure it's locked. If it's not locked and you're riding at a high speed, you can end up having a bad day. Second thing I check are the brakes. Physically pressing each brake lever to make sure it feels like what you're used to and nothing is loose. Look for smoothness you typically had before, as well as any strange noises when you apply brakes. Third, looking under the scooter, make sure all the rubber caps are securely on and you didn't forget them after charging. Next, I squeeze both tires with my fingers to make sure they roughly feel like the pressure they're supposed to have. I check the pressure more precisely once every couple of weeks, but before the ride a finger test is usually good enough. Next, if you're planning to come back after dark, I make sure the light has enough battery charge, if it's not wired in directly into your main battery. For example, for my light, the button will light up red if it's low. Lastly, I power up the scooter and note the amount of charge to make sure it has enough range for what I'm planning to use. Now that pre-flight check is done, time for the second tip: evaluate conditions. It's not always about going or not going, but knowing conditions will allow you to evaluate your safety margin and predict how aggressively you can push it. Is it wet or dry outside? If it's wet, note that traction might be limited, especially if you have solid tires. As a response, you might choose to ride a little slower in turns. If it's cold outside, the rubber might feel stiffer and have less traction as well. Temperature affects range, so make sure your scooter is appropriately charged, depending on temperature. Another thing, knowing where you're going to ride is important as well. If you're going off-road, or if there's gravel or sand on the road, you'll realize how much you should push the speed. And it's good to think about how congested the route is. Are you going during rush hour with lots of people and cars, or it's going to be mostly empty? Tip number 3. Choose what protective gear you're going to wear. First, there are a few options for helmets. You can choose between no helmet, a typical bicycle helmet, a snowboarding helmet like this, a full-face mountain bike helmet, or a full motorcycle helmet. All of these options offer different levels of protection. A typical bicycle helmet is good at protecting against concussions, but it doesn't really do anything to protect your face. A full-face helmet is great for that. I have a very lightweight mountain bike helmet that's usually my helmet of choice for riding the scooter. There's lots of ventilation for hot summer days, and the peripheral vision is great. I use at least a full-face helmet when I ride electric unicycles as well, since the electrical failure mode on those isn't as graceful as it is on scooters. When I commute on my Dualtron Spider, I typically ride with a motorcycle helmet, since I'm going 40 miles an hour or faster at times. The best feature about motorcycle helmet is the visor that you can open and close, so for cold winter days it's perfect not to get any wind in your face. The visor is also designed to fog up less compared to other options. However, choose your motorcycle helmet wisely, not to limit your peripheral vision and not to be too heavy. You might also choose to wear knee pads and elbow pads, and there are lots of options. These you can wear under your clothes, so no one will even know you have them on. And to add to everything said already, wearing gloves is key in my opinion. If you fall, we tend to first attempt to soften the impact with hands as a reflex, and it's great to have gloves for that. It's arguably better to avoid breaking your fall with your arms, and better to try rolling and sliding if you can help it, especially if you're wearing a jacket that is good for sliding. Tip number 4. It's important to stay visible when you ride, especially if you're planning to be on road, sharing space with cars, or in bicycle lanes not physically separated from cars with concrete barriers, or planning to cross roads on crosswalks. There are a few options here. If you want to be very visible, you can get one of those yellow or orange construction high visibility vests. I personally find those a little ugly, but they certainly work. Some normal jackets have reflective paint, as well as you can choose normal clothes you wear to have brighter colors, as opposed to being black or dark in color. Something as simple as choosing a t-shirt or jacket you wear might be important enough. In addition to passive visibility, you can also use lights to make yourself more visible. There are many choices here, and they're typically pretty cheap. I use a red flashing light that can be clipped on my motorcycle jacket, and it was literally a few dollars on Amazon. Also, my scooter comes with red lights in the back and some white lights in the front, and I choose to keep them on during daytime as well. Some scooters like the Dualtrons have RGB lights on the side, but keep in mind that only red in the back and white in the front is approved for roads. While it definitely improves visibility, it'll make it more likely police will want to chat with you, as some flashing and colorful lights mimic police lights, and they tend to not like that. Number 5. Do you have a bell or a horn on your scooter? These are also pretty cheap to buy and are sometimes helpful. Also, don't forget that you can use your voice when you ride. Tip number 6. Be careful braking in turns. If the scooter is not upright and you brake hard, especially with the front wheel, it can make the scooter disappear from under you. This is even more important if it's wet, if it's cold outside, if you have solid tires, if there is gravel or sand on the road, if the road surface is low traction like those metal plates or metal mesh on bridges. If you have pneumatic tires, remember that high pressure improves range but reduces the traction a little, making contact patch smaller. I typically start by braking with the rear brake and slowly add the front brake. Tip number 7. As you ride, try to predict what's going to happen next about 10 seconds in advance. If you're going slower, 10 seconds will mean less distance to look forward for, but when going fast, make sure to still look about 10 seconds ahead. If you're passing a bicycle or a pedestrian, it's of course best to assume the worst case scenario, that they're going to jump in front of you. But you can't always do that, so you can strike a reasonable balance between accounting for variables that could happen and still going on your way. Tip number 8. Know your limits and personal experience. I have quite a bit of experience in skydiving, having done over 1,000 jumps, and beyond a few basic rules, when it comes to many things, nobody's going to hold your hand and tell you shouldn't do something you're not ready for. Some things can be done very safely, with appropriate experience, but just emulating someone else without having that experience can be a bit dangerous, especially if it's something you've seen on YouTube. This applies to scooters as well. Nobody will tell you that you shouldn't go 50 miles an hour yet, after you've bought your shiny new Dualtron X. This is of course up to every individual person in terms of how much risk to accept, but it's important to make an informed decision. Tip number 9. It's good to be aware of personal factors. Are you sleepy, or tired, or stressed and have to rush to a meeting at work or late for school? Are you taking any medication that could affect your reaction time? It's usually not a go or no-go decision, but realizing you're tired might make you choose appropriate speed. Number 10. It's recommended to wear glasses or having a visor. If it's daytime and the sun is out, you can wear darker sunglasses. But for those evening or night rides, it's still important to wear clear glasses. There are a lot of flies and mosquitoes, insects and bees that can hit you in the face, and it can be anywhere between mildly annoying to really dangerous, especially if they hit you in the eye. Tip number 11. Have a good stance on your scooter. You want to make sure to stand back and not too far forward. This will allow for better braking performance, as well as make the scooter more stable and handle better in turns. If your deck is wide, you should be able to stand with your legs side by side. Some other people prefer a more skateboard type stance, with one leg turned sideways. It's more of a personal preference, and it's not clear one is strictly better than the other. When you ride, make sure to balance over your feet and not put too much pressure on the stem with your hands. Ideally, you want to hold the stem very lightly, and definitely don't try to bend it back and forward. Breaking the stem while you ride can be pretty bad, and even if it doesn't, pulling on it constantly will introduce more play and wobble over many hours of riding. If you're riding at night, make sure you have a good headlight to light up the road. The faster you go, the farther you want to be able to see. Most scooters come with small, inadequate lights, especially if they're mounted low to the ground. It's usually a good idea to get an external light mounted high up on the handlebars. This way you can angle the headlight down not to blind oncoming traffic. If your headlight is down low, it will be pointing straight or more up to light up the road, and will be more blinding to other riders. Since I frequently come back home from work at night, I have two external lights for redundancy. The primary light I use is a Raveman PR1600, and it has a really nice feature of low and high beams. Low beams have a sharp horizontal cutoff, similar to car or motorcycle headlights, that helps you not blind others. And with a press of a button, you can turn on high beam spotlight that will light up the road farther and better. There is a wireless control switch that comes with it, with a big button that you can use to toggle between low and high beams, as well as control the power setting. Number 13. There are a few things you can do to significantly prolong the lifetime of your battery. There has been a lot of research recently into battery longevity, and we're starting to understand quite well how to take care of batteries. For example, Tesla is claiming to soon release a 1,000,000-mile battery that will in most cases last as long as a human lifetime. That is accomplished in both adjusting battery chemistry as well as intelligently managing charging and discharging. When it comes to our scooters, there are a few things you can do to easily double or triple the lifetime of the battery. First, let's talk about individual battery cell. If you charge to 100% all the time, you're going to get approximately 300 to 500 full cycles. So if let's say your scooter goes 30 miles on a charge, you'll get 9 to 15,000 miles until a reduction in useful capacity that will make you want to get a new battery. However, if you charge to 85 to 90% during normal use, you can literally double the lifetime of your battery, expecting 600 to 1,000 charge cycles. And I would recommend charging to about 80% for even more lifetime. In addition, it's critical not to discharge below 20 to 25% as well, and arguably it's even more important than charging to 80%. Note that some scooters protect the battery already, and when they report 20%, there's already some safety margin built in, so you can go a little lower if you're using the percent charge that the scooter tells you. You want to look at voltage, and it's usually about 3.7 volts per cell that you don't want to get below when measured after the scooter rested for a while. The following chart shows lifetime depending on the depth of discharge that you choose. Notice how the black line is the steepest, that corresponds to 100% to 25% cycles. The best trade-off I'd say is the green line, and after about 4,500 cycles, you're still going to have 85% of original capacity and range, not taking into account battery aging. One important thing to note is that if you're planning to go on a long ride, go ahead and charge to 100% to get more range, as well as it'll help with staying away from being below 25%. It won't hurt much, especially if you charge up fully just before going, since what hurts the batteries mostly is keeping them stored at 100% as opposed to charging process itself. Speaking of storing the scooter, it's actually quite temperature dependent. If you look at this table, notice how much better long-term storage is at 40% charge as opposed to 100% at any temperature. If you keep it at 100% all the time at room temperature, after only 1 year, you'd lose 20% of capacity. If on the other hand you had it at 40%, you'd lose 4%. And storing at colder temperatures is even better. Just watch out for moisture and condensation that you really don't want to have. This data is mostly measured for each individual cell. However, our scooters are composed of many cells all wired in series in parallel. Therefore, in addition to charging to 80% and not discharging below 25%, I'd recommend the following. Every 15 or 20 charges or so, charge it up to 100% in order to balance the battery cells. This will make sure voltage stays even and equal between every individual cell. After charging to 100%, it's really nice to go for a quick ride to drop it back down to maybe 80%. Since, as I mentioned, you don't want to keep the battery at 100% for too long if you can avoid it. And finally, tip number 14. When you're riding, don't forget to have fun. While safety-related things might seem boring, with proper planning, it allows you to have a ton of fun riding these scooters. Since you're watching this video, you probably know what I'm talking about. It's really cool that technology advanced enough to allow for these nice scooters, taking you many miles at high speeds while having a lot of fun. And that's all I have. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys later.